being a boutique-sized firm, is that we leverage our relationships with our business partners, such as Alliance Pension, who is going to be the speaker on this call today. Alliance Pension is a third-party administrator that administrates actually a few 401k plans for us and our clients, and we've got another one in the pipeline right now. So today from Alliance Pension, we've got Jeff Feld. He's going to talk a little bit about 401k fee disclosure and fiduciary responsibility. There has been in the last couple of years some new guidelines around fee disclosure, which theoretically should have made that a simpler process. However, what we found as we bump in the client's plans is it actually made it a little muddier. So we have our slide up there. If you need to learn any further, or you don't get the opportunity to ask a question, please just go to our website, and we have our general mailbox on there. Shoot us a question, and we'll forward that on to Jeff. We can't answer ourselves. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to our friend Jeff Feld up in Chicago. Jeff, take it away.
Thank you very much, Keith, and appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your busy day today to join us and learn about what I am certain I may be the only one on the call who thinks is an absolutely scintillating topic, 401k fee disclosure. One of the reasons I think it's an interesting topic is for years we've been trying to articulate the hidden costs of fees to clients and prospective clients, and after many years of doing so, the Department of Labor, in true government fashion, caught up with us and tried to force plan sponsors and providers to show the fees that they were charging to plans, primarily to protect the participants in those plans. And many of the people on this call today are probably stewards of those plans, and therefore have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the participants are being charged fairly. I'll cover in a little bit more detail later, but of course in true government fashion as well, the regulations were written in such a way that they don't really completely cover their intended purpose. So it still falls upon those who are in charge of overseeing these plans to make sure that they are appropriate. So the topic that we're going to cover today, as Keith mentioned, is fee disclosure and the opportunities that you have to shine as somebody who is involved in a plan to ensure that everybody's needs are being met and that you are a good steward of your employees' money. So what is fee disclosure all about? As I mentioned earlier, it is the Department of Labor's attempt to force providers to disclose the true cost of a plan to a plan sponsor. I'm going to reiterate, in my humble estimation, they have failed badly. In fact, I'll say my estimation is a little less than humble. I've actually been asked and appointed as a small group to meet with the DOL on a frequent basis, about 3 or 4 times so far this year, to help them rewrite 408b2. And I've been very vocal in telling them how there are unintended consequences in the way 408b2 is written. They take lots of notes in these meetings. I haven't seen anything come out in the form of any draft revisions, though. But again, the government was shut down for a couple of weeks, so maybe that's the problem. Why should you care? We're going to cover why you should care about fee disclosure. I'm going to explain to you how you can care without spending a career on this. I mean, we all have lots of different things to do, and I want to make this so you can take a look at your plan and quickly break down the cost components. And then finally, what should you do? So 408b2 is a Department of Labor code. Its objective is to help you make informed decisions. These rules do have teeth. I have not seen the teeth used on plan sponsors yet, but the class action lawyers and class action participant groups are circling and forming, and there will be additional activity. There's been some activity over the last few years in terms of excessive lawsuits on 401ks. You can Google that and find there's been about 10 companies, probably over $100 million in penalties paid. Walmart, believe it or not, was a company that where prices are always falling. Their 401k was deemed to be overly expensive. They were buying retail share classes instead of institutional share classes, which had the same exact performance with lower costs. I just found it ironic that Walmart, of all companies, would fall into that trap. So what you as a plan sponsor must do is you must decide if compensation is reasonable. You are legally bound to decide if the compensation that is being provided to the providers of the plan is reasonable. That's not easy. You're supposed to determine if the plan costs are reasonable, and you're supposed to be able to determine if there are any conflicts of interest that may affect the service provider's performance of services. For example, in the past there was a provider, and this is all public, so I don't mind naming it. It was a principal who had 401k plans where they had a call center calling participants 55 years of age and older. The reason they were being called is because the participants were being induced to roll their money over to their own IRAs with the exact same funds that was in their plan that they were participating in. What the participants were not told was those exact same fund names were not the exact same funds. They actually had much higher expense ratios and therefore paid a nicer commission to the people in the call center and the agents. Principal was called on the carpet for this, and there was a settlement relative to this. Interestingly, Principal, based in Iowa, started their calls right in the heartland there, and there was a local Iowa-based issue. So the 408B2 covers what's called a service provider. Anyone with a contract or arrangement between themselves and the plan is what's called a covered service provider. If the disclosure is not provided, the contract becomes a breach of fiduciary responsibility. That responsibility falls on you. So how do I know how to start to examine the costs of my plan? We like to look at it like this. I say that there are 5 components, sometimes 4, to the cost of a retirement plan. And when you can identify each one of these components independently and add them up, I think you will have done a good job in determining the cost of your plan. The first cost, and typically the largest cost, is the underlying expenses associated with the investments within your plan. In the mutual fund world, they call these expense ratios. In the insurance world, they're sometimes called RAP fees or expense ratios. They are what the mutual fund, let's pick on a very low-cost fund, Vanguard Index 500 fund, which has an expense ratio that ranges somewhere between 3 basis points and 10 basis points, depending on the size of the investment. And 3 basis points would be 0.3%. 10 would be 1/10 of 1%. I'm sorry, 0.10 of 1%. That is the cost that that Vanguard assesses for managing that fund. So that's the first cost. Typical in a plan is about 52 basis points. About $52 or 52% of the cost is made up of that expense. The next expense would be the investment advisor. It could be the person who is the insurance agent or the independent registered investment advisor or the broker. They're going to get paid for placing the product and for advising the plan on which funds to use, making sure that the funds that are being used are appropriate and are meeting their benchmarks. They'll be involved in participant education, and for that service, they're typically paid a component of the cost of a plan. The next cost is record keeping. That's what our company does. One of the things our company does, that is the website, the 800 number, the participant statements on a quarterly basis, the disclosures, and so on. That typically makes up around 11% of a plan's cost. Administration is testing, government forms, plan document, all the things that go with keeping the plan in compliance with the applicable government rules. And lastly, some plans use an independent custodian. About 4% of the cost is typically attributable to an independent custodian. They hold the plan's assets safely and provide tax reporting for distributions. So there is where the cost of a plan is. There typically are no other costs unless you have outside legal counsel, but that's typically charged directly to the company. So this cylinder represents all the costs of a plan, and if you can identify them, as I said earlier, you can determine if your plan, what your plan's costs are. So you've received this fee disclosure, and I brought up Vanguard before. You've received this fee disclosure, and one of the things you want to see is, how do I start to identify these costs? Well, right over here, you'll see this particular fund, this is a small cap fund, not the one I referred to earlier, has an expense ratio of 35 basis points, 0.35%. So you can figure out that if you go back to the slide before, that will be a component of the investment funds here. So here is another fund from a fee disclosure. This is small cap index fund. You can see that there's a ticker symbol here that shows, and you can look this up on Yahoo Finance or Google or anywhere you want. This fund has a different expense ratio. This one is 135 basis points, or 1.35%, a much more expensive fund than the one that we looked at earlier. So now you can start to tease out and identify some of the underlying costs of the plan. This is from a fee disclosure from an insurance company. I believe this one's from John Hancock. And right here, what they're saying is they are spending no money. They're charging you no money for record keeping. So the fine folks at John Hancock, and I've seen this at Transamerica, I've seen this at Mass Mutual, the fine folks have said, we're going to do all this stuff, website, 800 number, call center, we're going to do it for free. That's kind of nice. Except if you look over here, they're saying, well, actually, there's 0.6% that we are assessing on your assets. So if you have a plan that's, let's say, $5 million, that would be $30,000 that they're assessing on for record keeping, and that's going to be taken out of the participants' investments. Now, you as a steward of the participant accounts may or may not realize that your participants are being assessed this fee, and you may or may not have any ability to determine if that fee is reasonable or not. There's no way that you can assert that Hancock's going to provide all those services for free. It's also difficult to determine if $30,000 a year is a good service, a fair service on that. So 60 basis points of record-keeping service in this particular one, and this is typical of a lot of insurance company plans, does not include certain things. It doesn't include the investment fund expense, which I showed you earlier. It doesn't include the investment advisor fee, so there's no independent investment advisor that's picking the funds in this plan. It's just that isn't included, and it doesn't include a TPA or compliance. So now you start to be able to add up the costs that I showed you earlier to determine if this plan is expensive or not. Here's another insurance company charge, and this is one of the things that we've explained to the Department of Labor about how poorly this 408B2 fee disclosure is. You might have thought that somewhat similar to the Energy Star rating on a hot water heater, you can break it down to one number. How efficient is this water heater at heating my water and using electricity? We don't make a determination as to how big of a water heater someone needs. That's up to the user. But we can tell you how efficient it is. I think a plan should be able to do the same thing, but that's not what happened. 408B2 has no format, no mandated format. So every insurance company, every mutual fund company that provides a plan is using a different format and referring to different things and using different terms. So here are things that you'll find in this particular insurance company's fee disclosure. Take a look at their additional fees here that they're assessing. This is, I believe this was on about page 22 of this particular fee disclosure in something called Exhibit C. So as you can see, this can get somewhat difficult. They also have an annual charge factor, and you can see over on here that there's, as the plan assets grow, the charges are going to grow. Now, I will submit to you as a plan provider for almost 30 years that the work relative to a plan that has $5 million in it, all things being the same except for the assets, when it gets to 10 million, the additional work is simply not there. The assets do not drive additional time or cost, and the trend in the low fee environment is a flat quoted fee, not an asset-based fee. Most of the companies, most of the financial institutions who sell plans like this are very wedded to asset-based fees because they get you in at a lower cost, and then inertia sets in and comfort, and people don't like to change. And as the plan goes from 5 to 10 to 50 million, the cost of running that plan and the profits for the insurance company go up significantly. The work does not. I can assure you the work doesn't increase as the plan assets increase. There's contract termination fees that are thrown in here back on Exhibit C, and we can go on. So I hope I've got you to the point where you've said, I hope this guy gets off this topic because I'm already bored. It seems like there's a lot of work here. And if you want to go through your 408B2 fee disclosure, put a little Excel spreadsheet up on your screen or piece of paper and start trying to identify all the costs, it probably won't take forever, but it'll take a little bit of time. There's another thing you can do. It's called benchmarking. And I'm going to tell you that benchmarking, by the way, is not I'm going to give away the ending of this story. Benchmarking is not a panacea or a cure-all or an instant way to determine if your plan is appropriately priced either. There's several different benchmarking services. This one is telling us that it's called Brightscope, and they're telling us our plan is got pretty high fees, this particular plan. And they're going to tell us why if we go further into the report, but I'm just going to show you that this plan has high fees according to this independent benchmarking service. Now, we benchmark the same plan using 4 different companies, 4 different benchmarking services, and I'm going to show you the different results we got. Here's another benchmarking tool, same plan, and they're telling us that we have a pretty low price plan. As you can see, here's another one. They're telling us that this plan's fees are 35 basis points higher than the typical plan. Again, this is the same plan. So as you can tell, it's really determined by the database that we're comparing our plan to. So do I get to just throw my plan specs onto a benchmarking service, have the benchmarking service deem my plan to be inexpensive and call it a day? I think it's a good start, but it certainly isn't doing a complete job because, as you can see, benchmarking as an industry is in its infancy, and there is no uniform database with which to measure your plan against. So it really depends which pool your plan gets thrown into, and each one of these providers has a different pool, and many of them don't overlap. So if I keep going on here, this plan says high fees again. So here's my summary. You know, being a CPA, I like everything in a spreadsheet at the end of the day. You can see Plan Tools said our investment cost was below average. The other 3, I'm sorry, Plan Tools said our investment cost was below average. Everyone agreed. Record keeping, Plan Tools, as the company here, said our record keeping was above average. Plan Tools by Asset said it was below average. So one of the things these benchmarking tools can't determine is how complex is this plan to run. It's almost like, well, I'll get to it in a minute. But they're not measuring all of the different parameters and dynamics of a plan, so they get a very myopic look at what's going on here. So you can see the advisor was deemed to be, with all due respect to Keith, the advisor was deemed to be overcharging this plan, and the total plan cost, Plan Tools said by participants, which is one way to look at it, it was above average, but by assets it was below average. Fiduciary benchmarks, another benchmarking tool, said the plan was above average, and the 401k averages book said it was below average. So what do I do with this? Well, I alluded to very briefly how plan design could impact fees. So let's take a look at something that I think is important to understand as a steward of your plan's assets, and that you need to understand that a plan is not really a relevant unit of measure any more than a car is something that we can accurately measure. Here's a car that we found on a lot for $10,000. Is that a good price? Is that a bad price? How do I benchmark that? Well, here's a little bit more about it. I believe this is Keith's last car. It's a Pontiac Fiero, 1987. It doesn't get real good gas mileage. Now here's another car we're going to compare it to. It's a Toyota Prius. It's double the price, as you can see. So does that make this a bad car? Well, 401k benchmarking would say this car is worse than Keith's Fiero. It doesn't take into account a lot of different things, and I could go through the fact that this car gets better gas mileage. So we have two cars that we're going to benchmark. One cost us 20, one cost us 10. The maintenance on the expensive car, the Prius, was $2,000 a year. That 87 Fiero needed a lot of work. It was $8,000 a year. Gas, that Prius is going to get much better gas mileage, depreciation, and at the end of the day, as you can see, the expensive car over a period of time is going to be, in fact, a much cheaper car. The same as a well-designed plan, which may have higher costs and not benchmark well, might be a cheaper and more cost-effective plan in the long run. So if you focus only on benchmarking and don't take into account the intended purpose of the plan, the operations of the plan, the complexity, you might end up with something like this. And I don't think that this is going to work very well for the guy who bought this cheap car. But he only focused on one thing. So we need to fix that. So how do I do that? Let's think about why companies sponsor retirement plans in the first place. We have to make sure that somebody can guide us through ensuring that these objectives are met and not just sell us a plan. That's one of the first things we need to do. Why do sponsors? So what do you do? How do you ensure that you walk into this situation with the right knowledge? You need an independent advisor. You need somebody who is going to guide you through the maze, who works for you and does not work for a company like Principal or MassMutual or Transamerica. Those people are paid by someone selling you a product. An independent advisor is paid by you to help you do what you need to do. The rules are complex. You need an expert to guide you through the maze. You need someone to listen to you before they even have a product in place for you, and someone who's going to have an independent opinion and continue to provide independent review. So how do they provide value? Determine if a plan's a good value. They can benchmark your plan for you in different ways, including using some of these benchmarking services. I wouldn't completely discount these services. I would just use them like any other tool. If you know what a tool's limitations are, they have value. They can stay on top of your situation and ensure that if your company changes, if you go from 300 employees to 700 employees and you have different divisions with different needs, or you go from 10 employees to 30 employees, they will be on top of making sure that the plan design stays fresh and current. They'll ensure that the service is proper, that you're getting what you need from the service providers, and they'll provide you independent investment guidance. To me, independent investment and guidance should be not limited to a menu of 200 or 300 funds that happen to have made an arrangement with a provider, but the whole universe of funds. How can I say that I'm doing a good job as a steward if my job is, as a baseball general manager, to pick the best team possible, and I limit myself to the American League West, when the rules allow me to draft a player from the whole American and National League? A lot of today's retirement plans are limited, like one baseball division. Today's technology and an independent advisor can allow you to pick funds from the entire league, American and National, all the different divisions, pick the best player, pick the best fund. So what can you do? Engage an independent advisor who works for you and not the company selling plans. So how do you ensure that as a fiduciary steward, you are doing your job? I've not given you a magic wand to wave over your plan, but I'm going to give you some magic questions, some of which might apply to your particular situation that can start you on the path of ensuring that you are meeting your fiduciary responsibilities and being a good steward of your participants' money. Have you had an independent review of your plan? Not the guy or woman who sold you the plan, but somebody else. Are people in your company contributing as much as they can? Are there people who are limited because of design limitations or failed discrimination tests? These are the design elements that add value to a plan that don't show up in benchmarking. Are you maximizing your current tax deductions? Has your record keeper offered to customize participant statements or provide online education that can help your employees ensure that they have a comfortable retirement? That's something that's very important in today's environment, is ensuring that participants who don't have any desire to get online or talk to somebody in person, for the most part, are led to an opportunity to do so. Do you receive your reports on a timely basis? Does your plan provide the proper education materials? Can you employ any investment advisory firm? With today's technology, you have to ask yourself, why am I limited to an insurance company's platform that's limited to a certain number of funds? I'll tell you, at some point 15, 18, almost 20 years ago, the insurance companies were the only ones that had the technology to provide a group contract with individual record keeping. That monopoly on that kind of technology has long expired, and there are many, many ways where you can have a plan that has all index funds. As a matter of fact, that's a great question to go to any provider with. Just hypothetically, ask your provider, if I wanted to use all Vanguard index funds or all ETFs, which are exchange-traded funds and very low cost, can you continue to provide a plan to me and at the same price? The answer generally will be no, or yes and no. Yes, we can, but the price will change. That is an easy way to tease out the true cost of your plan, because they're probably making a great deal of money on the investments without any explicit hard dollar charges. If you lower the cost of the investments, which is your responsibility to your employee constituents, you're going to lower the water level, and you're going to see what's below it in terms of actual cost. Are you using an unlimited choice of funds from the entire universe of mutual funds, including index funds and no-load funds? Those are good questions to ask your provider. Do you have a complete understanding of the fees? I would submit to you that after I tried to simplify how fees work, you still don't have a complete understanding of your fees, because it's hard to find where this stuff resides in these 408b2 documents. Are you receiving 100% credit for something called revenue sharing? There's a little secret in the business that every one of these funds, not everyone, many of these funds pays back to the plan provider what I'll call a spiff, or a payment for record keeping that goes legally under the table to offset the cost of providing the plan. That's a hidden cost that is very difficult to find. Does your plan have an investment policy statement, and not one that was a photocopy of something provided by an insurance company or mutual fund, but something written by an independent investment advisor? That's one of the most important stay-out-of-jail documents that you can have. You need a shopping list. You need, as a steward, it's not up to you to decide on a whim what funds, what kind of funds are going to go into this plan, what kind of replacement of these funds is going to take place if they underperform. It should all be spelled out in a policy, so you as a steward of this are simply following the policy that has been laid out. Find your investment policy statement. If you don't have one, you should. And with that, I'm going to say that there are a few different ways you can ask questions. You can raise your hand on the GoToWebinar screen. You can also chat with me, but I'm going to throw open the remaining time that we have to questions. I wanted to keep this quick. I hope it was helpful for those in attendance. We have a nice group of people attending, and I will turn it back to Keith for a minute to summarize what we've talked about while I wait for any questions. And if you click to raise your hand or chat, I will be able to see that very quickly.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. That was, as I mentioned earlier, I think, and Jeff alluded to it, is the 408 rules were supposed to make it easier. And what we've discovered in getting fee disclosures from various plans recently is it's actually, if anything, made it a little bit harder. And the way that these are fashioned and not uniformed, it's very difficult to discern. So just to clarify, I know Jeff mentioned several times independent investment advisors. And what we do, that is what we do. So when you're talking about benchmarking, the first thing that we do for a prospective client is we are TPA agnostic. We use Alliance Pension, but that's not the only TPA that we have access to, and certainly not the only one we use. We shop these around. We compare the different services and input, and to a certain extent, certainly it's a relationship, not just about dollars and cents. And we present that to our client and determine first and foremost who we're going to use as a TPA. So that's our first function, is to help pair up one of our clients with a third-party administrator. The second step is we do help with the plan design process, not in the design itself, but helping to interpret some of the things and answer general questions that the client may have about certain functions of the plan. We help we do the investment picking based on the criteria that the employer gives us. We do help with the investment policy statement as well, but that requires some input from the fiduciaries of the plan as well. And then we do the ongoing education, again, depending on the company themselves and the level of service that they would like and how many touches they want with their employees per year, so we do that also. And then to help fill the fiduciary responsibility further is every couple of years, even if you don't intend to switch your plan, you probably should shop it again and look around and see if there are changes in plan design that the old document is not taking advantage of, or if cost structure has changed, or if your plan's gotten bigger. And maybe in some cases that does give you some more leverage with some TPAs, although not with Jeff's. But so that's a piece of what we do. Jeff, do you have any questions? I'll open it up for some questions as well.
I have no questions at this time.
Okay. Well, you must have done a great job then, and I'm going to let the Fiero, was it Fiero jokes? Is that what that car was?
That was.
I did have a mullet in the 80s, but I did not, in fact, have a Fiero, just for the record. That was not actually my car, so just to clarify that piece. So once again, I think Jeff put our slide up. If you have any questions that you would like to ask additionally to that, you can, actually my email address is right on there. You can email something to me. You can go to our website. We have a contact page on there. We do have many of these events. We try to have about one a month. We skip a month every now and then if it's a holiday season or what have you. But if you have any questions, shoot us a note. Thank you very much for taking time out. Jeff, thank you for your time, and we appreciate everybody's carving out a little piece of their day with us.
Thank you.